UFC President Dana White went on Shannon Sharpe's podcast where he made a series of delusional and hypocritical statements when discussing Jon Jones and the potential Francis Ngannou matchup. And he talks about Jones versus Stipe as well. And we're going to take a look at all the clips in this video. But essentially what Dana White says, because he goes out of his way so far to shit on Francis Ngannou, he encourages fight fans to not purchase Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic when it supposedly happens later this year. Do not purchase the pay-per-view. That is Dana White's message from this podcast. And I'm here to spell it out for you because the reason that Dana is going on podcast after podcast after podcast is because these podcasts get big numbers. They expose him to maybe an audience that doesn't watch MMA and the UFC. But in particular, he goes on these podcasts because these hosts are not as educated on the sport and can offer no real pushback when Dana White makes ridiculous, ludicrous statements. They don't have the ability to kind of fact check him in real time and rebuttal certain statements, which we're going to do. We're going to call out Dana on some of the things that he says in this podcast because it's just ridiculous. And it goes against, almost the opposite of things he said in the past, which I'm going to show you in this video as well. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start with two clips that do not have to do with Jon Jones and Stipe. I thought one was really funny, and I think the other one is kind of newsworthy. I went through and watched about 75% of this podcast. I saw clips on social media. I sought out the original source. I will link it down in the description. But I thought these other two clips were worth putting in a video. The first one's actually just funny, so let's check it out.
Power slap.
Look, you can tell Shannon Sharpe just thinks power slap is an absolute joke. But watch what Dana does here. Dana's like, puts on a shit-eating grin to kind of hide his anger. How dare you make fun of power slap?
Oh,
look at this shit-eating grin. He's actually angry here. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. He's actually angry. But watch what he does.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, there are very few times that there are two slaps.
The old power slap cup. Dana, if you ever see one of these videos, UFC staff ever sees one of these videos, please send me a power slap cup. I will start drinking out of it on stream. I will drink out of it in videos. Get me a power slap cup. I can't buy them anywhere online. I would love to have one. Then he goes on to a diatribe, hyping up power slap. We're not going to look into that. Now, this next clip that does not have to do with Jon Jones, the last clip that doesn't have to do with Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic, has to do with a former champion potentially returning to the sport very, very soon. Listen to this.
You should. And what happened with Nunes, I love Amanda Nunes. We have an incredible relationship.
Listen, watch the question and watch Dana White's answer. He almost slips up here.
Coming back?
Huh?
Is she coming back?
She could come back. There's a possibility she could come back.
He almost says yes. So let me just break this for you right now. Kayla Harrison versus Raquel Pennington later this year. Kayla Harrison most likely beats Raquel Pennington. Late 2024, early 2025, we'll get Kayla Harrison defending her belt against Amanda Nunes in her return. That's a massive fight. That's huge for women's MMA. That is what Dana White's plan is. I know people are going to say, how can you get that from just that short clip? I'm telling you, that's what the master plan is. And it's not even that bold of a prediction. Now, let's jump in to the Jon Jones stuff. Because the Jon Jones discussion is just incredibly stupid. And I wish I could have been there to rebuttal some of these ridiculous statements that Dana White says. But this is just kind of setting the scene of what Dana White has to say about Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. Because Shannon Sharpe says, look, Francis Ngannou was on air and he said that the UFC even said Jon Jones was scared of me at one point in time, which is basically true. We're going to fact check that in a little bit, but this is Dana's response.
Afraid of Francis.
Not only is Jon Jones not afraid of Francis, Jon Jones is the baddest fighter to ever live, ever, in any combat sport.
He does have 2 German Shepherds, which Dana may or may not mention in this podcast. May or may not mention.
If you look at Jon Jones is undefeated in the UFC.
All right, Dana, we get it. He's undefeated in the UFC. Now, this next clip, he really starts going in on Francis Ngannou here. Just starts letting Francis Ngannou have it and making ridiculous statements, basically playing MMA math and whatnot. And he does it throughout this interview and throughout this whole sequence when they're discussing Jon Jones. Listen to this.
Right up. Jon Jones is undefeated Never lost, and he went through murderer's row.
Yeah.
Then he goes out for 3 years, right? Sits out for 3 years.
By the way, part of that 3 years was contract negotiations.
Comes back and beats
Cyril
Gane. Like that, easily. In my opinion, he does the same thing to Francis.
What?
100%. Does the same thing to Francis.
He does the same thing to Francis 100%. What? What? Just because you're playing MMA math? We're going to break that down a little bit more because he gets into it a little bit more. So I don't want to I want to get through some of these clips, but completely ridiculous statement. So why were you trying to make the fight then? If it was so easy to determine who was going to win.
Jon Jones, Francis didn't want to fight Jon Jones. Jon Jones is the scariest, most badass fighter of all time.
So Jon Jones had Francis Ngannou terrified. Well, that is just simply not true on so many levels. Francis Ngannou was begging for the Jon Jones fight prior to winning the title. He then won the title and was begging for the Jon Jones fight. Ultimately, it didn't happen because Jon Jones was in contract negotiations. Then the time that Jon Jones finally settled with the UFC, Francis Ngannou was on his way out because he was refusing to re-sign without some, concessions from the UFC. So it's just ridiculous to say, 100% Jon Jones runs through Francis, and he kind of gives his breakdown of why here in a second. But just a ludicrous statement from Dana White, and it's just ridiculous that he expects people to even believe this. Just completely ridiculous. Now, in this next clip, he goes on to just hype up Jon Jones even more. It's getting embarrassing at this point. The way Dana White, I understand Jon Jones is the GOAT. I concede that 100%. But the way Dana is hyping him up and deep-throating him, making ridiculous statements that don't even have to do with the GOAT discussion. And he does it a little bit in here. It's going to be maybe one of the second to last clips I show you. It just gets embarrassing, but let's listen to some more.
Be appreciated until he's gone.
Right.
But I'm telling you right now, when you talk about who the baddest man on the planet is, 2 guys get locked in a room, who's walking out? It's fucking Jon Jones all day, every time.
Well, then lock Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall in a room together, please. Please. That's what the fans want. We don't want this shit-eating grin. Anybody who gets locked in a room with Jon Jones isn't coming out. I mean, this man sounds like he's 70 years old. Yeah, you lock any of them in a room together, we know who's coming out. No, we don't. We don't know what's in that room. We don't know what kind of weapons are in that room, okay? And we want to see him fight Tom Aspinall. We wanted to see him fight Francis Ngannou, but you couldn't make that happen. By the way, it's still possible to make that happen. I'm not going to sit here and be delusional and act like the UFC would help promote that fight because they wouldn't want to give any shine to PFL, but that fight's still available to be made at this point in time. If he really wanted to, he could co-promote that fight and still make a shit ton of money, more than he's probably going to make for Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Now, in this next clip, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. He goes on to hype Jon Jones up and talks about the dark side of Jon Jones. It starts to get comical here.
Looked at as, wow, this guy's
And he's running through him. It's not...
For anybody to even try to say Jon Jones wouldn't fight what makes Jon Jones...
I want you to listen to that again. He's basically saying for anyone to even imply that Jon Jones didn't want to fight anyone, for anyone to imply Jon Jones was scared of fighting someone or didn't want to fight someone, for anyone to imply that was crazy.
Looked at as, wow, this guy's
And he's running through him. It's not...
For anybody to even try to say Jon Jones wouldn't fight
There definitely wouldn't be a clip of Dana White implying that Jon Jones was scared of Francis Ngannou. There's no possible way, right? There's no possible way, right? Let's jump back to UFC 260 post-fight. The last time that Stipe Miocic fought, which was back in 2021. 3 long years ago, when Stipe got folded like a lawn chair by Francis Ngannou. Let's see what Dana has to say.
Man, the idea of a Jon Jones fight seems awfully exciting right now. And Jon came out, tweeted, said, show me the money. What appeals to you most? Because it seems like that would be an amazing super fight.
If I'm Jon Jones and I'm home watching this fight, I start moving to 85.
Why would Jon Jones move to 185? He's implying that Jon Jones is scared of Francis Ngannou because Jon Jones is in contract negotiations. And if you want to say I'm grasping at straws there, that's not what he really said. Oh, he makes it very clear when a follow-up question is asked. By the way, listen to the sycophant media. Oh, John, Dana, you're so funny. 185, so funny.
You think that's a fight that you'd like to put together next? I mean, I know we don't matchmake, but that sure does seem exciting.
Listen, I could sit here all day and tell you, what show me the money mean? I tell you guys this all the time. If you can say you want to fight somebody, but do you really want to?
Yeah.
Do you really want to? Listen to that again. You tell me what he's implying here.
What show me the money mean? I tell you guys this all the time. If you can say you want to fight somebody, but do you really want to?
He's saying Jon Jones does not want to fight Francis Ngannou. He's saying Jon Jones is negotiating himself out of a Francis Ngannou fight because he's scared. He should move down to 185 because he's so terrified. That is what he's blatantly implying there. It's not even subtle. It's not even subtle. So for Dana to act this way on this podcast is just complete revisionist history of just merely a couple years ago, all because of who signed contracts with the UFC and who didn't. And I understand he's a promoter, but he needs to be called out for this bullshit. And of course, when he goes on a podcast with someone who doesn't really pay attention to the sport that much, they're not going to be able to call him out on this. They're not going to be able to push back. They're not going to be able to rebuttal. That's exactly why Dana White loves going on these podcasts, but it gets even worse. It gets even worse. I mean, this guy starts talking about this Stipe Miocic fight. Listen to this.
Makes the most sense.
First of all, he has to fight Stipe. That fight has to happen.
Okay.
First of all, he has to fight Stipe. That fight has to happen. According to who? Nobody wants to even see that shit. Stipe Miocic hasn't fought in over 3 years. I didn't even have a channel when Stipe got folded like a lawn chair by Francis Ngannou. And that fight has to happen? And it gets even worse. It gets even worse here in a little bit of him hyping up Jon Jones because people are losing interest in a potential Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight. It was already lukewarm summer 2023. It's just going in the dumps more and more by the day. But according to Dana, it has to happen. Well, wait a second. I thought you were getting into MMA math early. He gets into MMA math a little bit more. We're going to break it down here in a second. But the fight has to happen delusional.
Okay.
You have a guy who's looked at as the greatest heavyweight ever versus the greatest fighter ever, right? That fight has to happen. And I don't disagree with DC. The next fight should be Aspinall.
Okay.
Okay, that I agree with. The next fight should be Aspinall before Stipe. It shouldn't. Stipe needs to get a win. You can't sit out for 3.5 years coming off a loss and expect a title fight. What a joke this organization has become at some points. It's just annoying. Now, this next part, I mean, this stuff just starts to get comical. I have to show you guys this stuff. This stuff just starts to get funny. Listen to Dana White here, talking more about Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. And Dana White finally unveils why he stormed out of the arena at UFC 270 and did not wrap the belt around Francis Ngannou. I've pointed this out before in one other podcast where he revealed this, but you can tell this is why he stormed out.
He should just retire because there's nothing else left for him to prove.
There's nothing for him to prove now. He already moved up to heavyweight and walked through
Cyril Gane. I mean, it
Francis Ngannou barely made it through Cyril Gane.
Yeah.
If Cyril Gane doesn't go for that submission, Cyril Gane wins that fight. Jon Jones walked through him.
He did.
Like he was nothing.
So there you go. Jon Jones walked through Cyril Gane. Francis barely got through Cyril Gane. If he didn't go for that heel hook, Cyril Gane would have won. That pissed Dana off beyond that. I would have loved a point of view camera at Dana White the second Cyril Gane goes for that heel hook and lays on his back and loses the 5th round. I would have loved to have seen that. He stormed out of the arena because he was pissed because Francis Ngannou was choosing to fight out his deal. But even forget about that part of a portion of the statement. Jon Jones walked through Cyril Gane. Francis struggled with Cyril Gane. Let's not even take into account that Francis came in with a torn ACL but wanted to fight out his contract because the UFC was freezing him out. We're doing MMA math. I think Jon Jones blows through Francis Ngannou. 100% blows through Francis Ngannou. Just because Francis didn't beat Cyril Gane as impressively as Jon Jones beat Cyril Gane. Well, if we're doing MMA math here. What happened when Francis Ngannou fought Stipe Miocic? This is what Stipe looked like when he fought Francis Ngannou in his last fight, his very last fight. At this point, I'm ready to invite Stipe Miocic over to my 4th of July barbecue because I need some extra seats. He got folded like a lawn chair. So if Jon Jones would blow through Francis Ngannou because he blew through Cyril Gane and Francis struggled with Cyril Gane, what does that say about Stipe Miocic? He's in his 40s. long layoff, folded like a lawn chair in his last fight by Francis Ngannou, and Jon Jones would blow through Francis Ngannou, so that must mean Jon Jones would blow through Stipe Miocic. So you know what that tells me? Even if you take out the fact that he got brutally chinned, even if you take out the fact he's been off for almost damn near 4 fucking years, that means there's no real interest. There's no real interest in Jon Jones versus Stipe because Jon Jones is going to blow through Stipe. You should not order the pay-per-view. This is how we vote with our wallets. Do not buy Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Now, me personally, I'm going to buy it. I have to watch the fights. I have to cover it for my channel. I would love to take a stand, and maybe if I didn't have the channel, I probably would take a stand and maybe go out and watch it. But Dana White is outright telling you right to your face, listen, Stipe is not going to be competitive against Jon Jones. Do not order the pay-per-view. That's what he's telling you here. It's just completely ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. All just so he can jump through hoops to shit on Francis Ngannou, and it gets even more embarrassing. The last clip I'm going to show you, or actually, you know what, before we get into the last clip, which is hilarious and ridiculous, if we're doing MMA math, let's jump back to UFC 247. 2 fights ago for Jon Jones, February of 2020. Jon Jones fought Dominic Reyes. Since we're doing MMA math here, let's see how Dana scored the fight.
Going into the last round, I had Dominic Reyes 3-1 going into the last round. My kids are terrorizing me that the fix is in and how can this happen, Dad? Reyes won that fight.
So there you go. He had a 3-2 going in, or 3-1 for Reyes going into the last round. Jon Jones won the last round. So therefore, Reyes won. So that means, I guess, Ryan Spann, Yuri Prohaska, I can't even remember everyone that chinned Dominic Reyes over the last couple years. That means all those guys can beat Jon Jones because Reyes, according to Dana, Reyes defeated Jon Jones. He's undefeated. You know, he's the best ever. He would run through Francis Ngannou. He didn't run through Dominic Reyes. And also, that doesn't even take into account skill sets. You know, we're not taking into account injury from Francis Ngannou. We're not taking into account the MMA math doesn't work. What about skill sets? He out-wrestled Cyril Gane. Francis easily out-wrestled Cyril Gane as well. And he was injured. So imagine Francis getting better. Also, Francis has the threat of nuclear power in his hands. It's an entire different stylistic matchup. That's why everyone wanted to see it. So just because you got to talk down on Francis Ngannou, now you're basically demoting a potential Jon Jones-Stipe Miocic match. Now, this last clip I'm going to show you of Dana White, I mean, this shit's just hilarious. And it's crazy because the reason I wanted to make this video is, one, I have to defend Francis Ngannou because of all the hate he got from the MMA fans who were taking their marching orders from Dana White and Dana White's little, sycophants like Chael Sonnen trying to shit on him for the last few years. But also because we have to revolt against this. We have to push back against this. Dana White is starting to feel the heat. He's starting to see fan backlash about Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. We have to keep it up. Because look at him going through all these different weird things that, Jon Jones did this, Jon Jones does that, so it makes him a total badass. And he may or may not mention German Shepherds again. He may or may not mention German Shepherds again. Listen to this.
I'd kill you. And then Jon Jones, the stuff that's gone on in his personal life, when all the nuttiness was going on during COVID and people were rioting and all that shit, Jon Jones was walking around the streets of his town smacking spray paint cans out of kids' hands.
Jon Jones is pound for pound. Jon Jones is the baddest dude on the planet. He was smacking spray paint cans out of kids' hands during 2020 unrest. It gets even worse. Oh my God, Dana. Yeah. One time I took candy from a baby. I seen a baby with candy and I just snatched up that candy and I ran off. I think I should take on Jon Jones next. I think I'm the baddest man on the planet. Put me in a room with Jon Jones. I know who's coming out and it's not going to be him. Okay. All right. You don't want to test me, Dana. You don't want to test me. I've been a vigilante before. All right. Just like Jon Jones. But let's listen to what also Jon Jones, what other credentials, non-athletic credentials does Jon Jones have? Does he have 2 vicious dogs? Does he shoot guns? Let's see what Dana has to say.
And being like, get your fucking ass home. Wow. Stop fucking up my town. And
wow. Oh my God, Dana. He smacked spray paint cans out of kids' hands and told them to go home. What an American badass. Can we give this dude the fucking key to the city? Can we give it the key to the city? You know what? I'm going to one-up Jon Jones. I'm going to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm going to set up my own sobriety checkpoint. Does that make me better than Jon Jones? Does that make me more of a badass? I'm going to set up a sobriety checkpoint. Well, let's listen to the rest of this.
Jon Jones. Jones is a big gun guy.
Yes,
Shoots.
I've seen.
He's got the dogs that are trained to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Jon Jones is a bad dude.
Do you?
That shit was hysterical. He's got 2 dogs that are trained, and he shoots guns. Well, you know what, Dana? I got a fucking shillelagh, okay? And I like to fight, all right? Does that make me more of a badass than Jon Jones? I don't need a gun. I got a shillelagh. I'll brandish my shillelagh. Someone even just gives me one wrong look, I'll brandish my shillelagh, okay? And I got a vicious dog. He's sweet, but he's trained. And he's 130 pounds, Dana. 130-pound Cane Corso. Put me on the pound-for-pound list, Dana. That makes me a badass. I'm more, I have more of a resume to step in there than Stipe Miocic, who's been answering phones at the fire department for the last 3 years. This is ridiculous from Dana White. I can't stand this stuff, and it just pisses me off. He's just trying to hype up Jon Jones because he's feeling the heat on the Jon Jones-Stipe Miocic matchup. But based on Dana White's MMA math, Jon Jones is going to run through Stipe anyway. And he would run through Francis anyway. So that only makes one matchup the matchup we should make, unless we can dig through Tom Aspinall's resume and find someone that they have mutually fought and we can do the MMA math there. The only fight to make is Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. What a fucking joke. This guy fumbled the biggest heavyweight fight of all time in Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones. And he sits here and acts like he didn't pretend Jon Jones was scared of Ngannou when Jon Jones was sitting on the sidelines trying to negotiate a new contract. And I have to call this stuff out because he goes on these softball podcasts where it's just softball question after softball question after softball question. And it is a complete disgrace. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.